Eleanor Williams's claims that she'd been trafficked by an Asian grooming gang led to protests, racist attacks, and claims of a cover-up. Eventually, she was jailed for lying.
I don't want to be that girl that cries rape. I'm not that person.
I'm Sky News' Jason Farrell, and in Unreliable Witness, we ask, why did she lie? And explore unanswered questions with new revelations. Follow Unreliable Witness wherever you get your podcasts.
I want to make a wholehearted and unequivocal apology for this terrible injustice. First, to apologise for the failure in blood policy and blood products and the devastating and so often fatal impact this had on so many lives, including the impact of treatments that were known or proved to be contaminated, the failure to respond to the risk of imported concentrates, the failure to prioritise self-sufficiency in blood, the failure to introduce screening services sooner, and the mismanagement of the response to the emergence of AIDS and hepatitis viruses amongst infected blood victims. Second, to apologise for the repeated failure of the state and our medical professionals to recognise the harm caused. This includes the failure of previous payment schemes, the inadequate levels of funding made available, and the failure to recognise hepatitis B victims. And third, to apologise for the institutional refusal to face up to these failings, and worse, to deny and even attempt to cover them up. The dismissing of reports and campaigners' detailed representations, the loss and destruction of key documents, including ministerial advice and medical records, and the appalling length of time it took to secure the public inquiry which has delivered the full truth today. Mr. Speaker, layer upon layer of hurt endured across decades. This is an apology from the state to every single person impacted by this scandal. It did not have to be this way. It should never have been this way. And on behalf of this and every government stretching back to the 1970s, I am truly sorry.
Those words said by the Prime Minister today are the result of a scandal that is almost unfathomable in its scale. 3,000 people have died and 30,000 others are also victims, while it happened over the course of several decades. People being given infected blood products without their knowledge has destroyed families and wrecked futures. I'm Matt Barbet and this is the Sky News Daily. And now, 6 years in the making, the inquiry into what happened has concluded with a detailed report that basically describes a dystopian society that people will find hard to believe was 20th century Britain. Retired Judge Sir Brian Langstaff was its chair, and in delivering his findings was greeted by a powerful emotional response from victims and their families.
The words come from you and your stories. Those are the people who have written this report, all from your very different perspectives.
Among Sir Brian's 12 recommendations include an immediate compensation scheme, memorials for victims, and for anyone who received a blood transfusion before 1996 to now be urgently tested for hepatitis C. Sky News health correspondent Ashish Joshi has followed the story for a long time and was in Central Hall in Westminster for the end of its latest chapter.
It's an incredible atmosphere. Sir Brian Langstaff took to stage. He was mobbed when he arrived here this morning by families of the victims, the infected, the affected. And you could see the relationship that he has managed to build and forge with these campaigners. These people have campaigned so long and so hard, tirelessly. And just now, when he took to the stage, it's the first time they've seen him and the first time they'll hear from him after the publication of this report. This was an outpouring of emotion, and you get a sense of gratitude more than anything else. There's certainly relief. You can feel the relief here. But just now, that outpouring of emotion, and I'll tell you, Matt, why that is so important. This is a community that is fearful of authority, does not trust anyone in any position, from government ministers to civil servants to doctors to NHS leaders, because for decades they've been lied to, they've been gaslighted, and they've been told that they're making things up and there is no conspiracy. So Brian Langstaff, as the author of this report, he has listened to them for the last 6 years, thousands of pages of documents, hundreds of heartbreaking testimony. And what he has managed to do in that time, he has managed to win their trust. And that is absolutely crucial for anyone to really go into this scandal at any depth. Would have to have the trust of this community. And you saw, or you can hear, the reaction from the community to Sir Brian. And it really tells you a lot about the relationship between the two.
I've spoken to a couple of people the past few days who've been affected by this. I know you've been doing exactly the same over the course of weeks and months in anticipation, Ashish, of this day. Even so, are you surprised by how powerful this moment has been?
I'm in awe of these campaigners and their stoicism and their tenacity and, most of all, their resilience. The one thing about the report is people keep asking me, what does this report tell us? It doesn't actually tell us anything we haven't suspected or heard before. It talks of cover-ups, of documents going missing, evidence being hidden. It talks about doctors gaslighting patients and telling them that there's nothing to worry about, even though they knew the risks involved. So in that sense, does the report say anything we didn't suspect? No. But now you have a retired High Court judge who's delivering the report into a public inquiry of the biggest scandal in the NHS's treatment history. And it's everything we've said. This is one of the things that struck me. Sir Brian says, you will scarcely believe that such things could happen in this country. That's one of the opening lines to a report. So you are about to be told about sinister experiments being carried out on children without them or their parents being told. If I told you that happened on an NHS site in this country, you would simply say, that can't happen. Nobody would have allowed that to happen. And then years later, after finding the evidence, presenting the evidence, telling people this is what happened, nobody believing you, and then you have a public inquiry report saying exactly the same thing. So that's why this is such a profound moment for all the campaigners in that hall today.
It's terrifying, isn't it? I mean, it's dystopian and it's here, and it's just the latest scandal. It's not a singular one. People will think about the post office in Hillsborough and all those other things where individuals, loved ones, family members have been wronged in such an incredible and almost unbelievable way.
But now they have what they've been saying for so long in an official document, which will be presented to government. So it's vindication. That's a word I keep hearing everywhere I walk in this hall. People tell me they feel vindicated. They feel bittersweet vindication because they didn't want to fight for so many years for their voices to be heard and to be believed. Successive governments avoided having a public inquiry or setting up any sort of a redress or addressing these issues because they didn't want to pay out compensation. That's what Sir Brian is actually saying in his report, because the government didn't want to engage with this and it kept dismissing any claims and allegations because it didn't want to pay the billions, which is now going to have to pay at some stage. Speaking to some of the people here today saying, it's great that you're here, it's great you've come this far, you've got your day, but when you look around and you think, all of my friends have been dying at the rate of, two a week or 3 a week. All of those people should have been here with their campaigners standing side by side, but so many people have died waiting for this day, and they are continuing to die. So it's so important now for the government to take this report and address all the wrongs, and they can start with the compensation, which has to be paid, and then the apology, then the memorials, and then a remembrance, a service held every 6 months. to make sure that we never forget and we learn the lessons. And there's also a lot about NHS leadership. There is a line used in the report, doctor knows best. And I think we've all felt that before, where you go to a clinician, you place your trust in that doctor or that medic, and you just assume that because they're in that position, they are going to treat you because they've taken that Hippocratic oath and it's their duty. But then when you question, something's gone wrong and you say, I don't think that treatment's quite correct, you're then just gaslighted. You don't know anything about medicine, you don't know about research, you don't know about science. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. And this culture perpetuated right across the research establishment, the people who were working with HIV, hepatitis C, haemophilus, and it should have stopped right at the beginning when the first warnings were flagged.
The Hippocratic Oath, the promise to do the right thing by the patient. Look, many people will be cynical about the impacts of inquiries and their reports because so often they haven't been acted upon. So when it comes to compelling people in positions of power now to do the right things after this scandal, are we going to see a change?
I think you have to hope that you will see a change. Otherwise, the 30,000 infections, the 3,000 people who have died, all of that means nothing if the medical establishment, if governments, if civil servants do not really step back and think about their actions and the impact they have on people's lives, then this report shouldn't have been commissioned. But the fact that these people have fought for so long, you've got Sir Brian saying all of these things, that means they've been listened to, it's in black and white, it's a public record, and we will have a government response. Ultimately, it's going to be up to people in those positions of power and authority to take on board the recommendations of this report and make sure that a shameful tragedy like this can never, ever happen again.
We'll pause there, and after the break, a victim and campaigner speaks to me about how this momentous day feels to her. Thousands of people infected with poisoned blood and their families have been waiting for this day. One of them, Rosamund Cooper, was infected with hepatitis C and speaks to me also from London's Central Hall. Ros, how are you feeling now that the report has come out, having taken such a long time?
It's quite difficult to actually explain how I'm feeling because it's been such a long time. It's been since the age of 20 for me. I've been fighting for this. I'm now 50 as of this year. And the last month, it's been like a sort of momentum has been building, a turbulence that I've been feeling, and it's just been getting more and more heightened as we've been getting nearer and nearer to today, just because of the significance of it. My feeling based on what I have seen and what I have heard is that actually what we've been saying for years and years and what has been being denied for years and years, we've been told that the best decisions were made at the time, our interests were put first, is wrong, and that our interests as patients were not put first, cost was put first, safety was put second, and to discover that, have that in writing, vindicating what we've been doing for all these years is, I can't even describe it. I feel sick, I'm shaking, it's a very difficult thing to explain how powerful that feels.
Because the effect of the scandal on you, as with so many victims of this, has been huge in your life, hasn't it?
I was already living with a severe bleeding disorder and managing that, I was living with that as best I could. Then I found out at 19 I'd got hepatitis C. I was told accidentally by a different hospital to my own hospital. So that was a horrifying shock. Then I was seeing friends dying from liver cancer or having to have liver transplants, so that was my future as far as I was concerned. I was planning my funeral in my 20s. It's affected every aspect of my life. It's affected my family's life. I had to give up my career. In 2007, I was an IT consultant. I had to give up on having a family because the treatment I had for the hepatitis C was so toxic, it made me ill for years. I'm still recovering from that. And actually what I discovered since having the treatment is that it can make you infertile, which is what happened to me. So not only have I had physical impacts, there's been an awful lot of psychological damage from this. The fact that I felt dirty ever since I found out about it. It's affected getting into relationships because I feel like it's something I've got to tell people as soon as I meet them because it's a risk to them. It's just affected every aspect of my life, my self-confidence, my feelings of self-worth, an awful lot of guilt about the fact I'm still alive when other people aren't, guilt about the fact that my mum and dad spent most of my life fighting for me, guilt about the fact that I wasn't able to give to my marriage what I wanted to be able to, and that ultimately broke down also. It's huge. It's absolutely, it's defined my life, and it's irreparably changed my life. So to get the fact that, to kind of affirm that our fight has not been in vain is huge, and I just can't really describe how that feels.
Ros, with all those challenges that you've overcome, and many people listening would think just dealing with one or two of those things would be hard enough and define their life to a degree, but that long list of things you've mentioned there begs the question, how do you then keep fighting to get what we've got today? What has kept you going in pursuit of the inquiry and now its findings?
The fact that we believed that we were right, the fact that we believed that wrong was done, even though we were being told it wasn't. We just knew, and things were uncovered by us years and years ago to prove that that was the case. But of course, at that point, nobody was listening. So it's been about trying to get somebody to listen who's got some power to do something. We're a vulnerable group of people, disabled people in many cases, that we have enough to deal with, as you say. So to have this on top of that, I can't even find the words to describe that. I'm really sorry.
It's totally understandable because it's such a huge thing, a huge undertaking. But here we are on this Monday and the findings are out against the backdrop of plenty of other scandals. Are you hopeful now that things could change, that there will be lessons, there will be punishment as a result of today's findings?
That's really what I would like to happen. I think one of the most important things is that lessons are learned, because what we've seen over the years that we've been fighting is that this has still been happening. Decisions are still being made above the patient. People are making decisions for patients that are not in their best interest. People are coming to harm still now, and that needs to stop. There needs to be an openness and an honesty encouraged, so that when mistakes are made, or in this case deliberate things are done wrong, that light is shone on them and that the people behind it are held to account, and that then can be acknowledged and remedied at the time, not 20, 30 decades later.
Ros, do you think this shows us something about how our society is dysfunctional, how the establishment overlooks the experience of individuals like you, whether it be an NHS scandal or a post office scandal or something else?
Actually, as a society, we should be pretty ashamed of what's happened to a number of different vulnerable groups. It's about power, it's about truth. It says a lot about our society. And what I would like to say is that now our current government have a chance to actually stand up against that and say it's not acceptable, say that this is not okay, that this should never have happened, and do something to put it right.
This moment that you've been waiting for such a long time has now only just arrived. But do you have a sense now that beyond this moment, your life will start to change in some way? You can get some closure, as people often put it, and perhaps look forward to the rest of your life?
I think in my case, I'm lucky in that potentially I can do that. I'm always mindful of people who have lost loved ones, because how can they? But closure is an interesting phrase. I'm not sure if there will ever be complete closure. What I would like is to not have to keep fighting. I think those of us that have fought this for years and years and years have known nothing else. Our bodies are constantly in this stress response, which is not good for us health-wise. So to be able to let that go, to set that weight down, and to be able to look forward without carrying that and without having that hanging over us will make a massive difference. And I do think, I'm hoping that it will give me the chance to heal a little bit, or to start looking to heal the damage that has been done by this as much as I can.
Ros, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
This is obviously hugely significant in this decades-long scandal, but it certainly isn't the end. The inquiry wasn't looking for civil or criminal liability, but that accountability is what many of the victims want, and it may now start to be pursued through the courts. Thanks for listening.